Good afternoon. Russian President Vladimir Putin may have averted a conflict with the Wagner mercenary forces, but his position seems far from secure. Yevgeny Prigozhin's forces stepped back from confrontation last night after a deal was brokered by the leader of Belarus. Callum Watkinson has the latest.
Yevgeny Prigozhin left the Russian city of Rostov like a conquering hero, but his conquest had lasted less than a day. He said his Wagner fighters' heavily armed dash for Moscow was a freedom march, but that he called it off to save lives.
We haven't shed one drop of blood of our fighters. Now the time has come that the blood might be shed on one of the sides. We're turning back our columns and returning to our field camps.
But blood was shed. 12 Russian airmen died when Wagner shot down their helicopters. As Wagner troops sped for Moscow, roads were dug up to stop them. But by this morning, Russian state TV was reporting that the threat Putin had perceived was past.
This is the result of very difficult negotiations. Let me remind you that earlier Vladimir Putin addressed the Russians and this speech had an effect.
That speech, full of allegations of betrayal and inevitable punishment, is now being framed as the reason for a literal U-turn by Prigozhin on the road to Moscow. As the holes in the highways dug just hours earlier were filled in, it was announced Prigozhin would face no charges and that his men could sign direct contracts with the Defense Ministry. In Rostov-on-Don today, it felt almost like the short-lived insurrection never happened. Questions it has raised about Vladimir Putin's leadership, though, may prove more enduring. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
BT say they have restored the 999 emergency system after an earlier fault. It meant calls to the police, fire and ambulance services were not being answered. Well, Martha Fairley is outside the headquarters of the London Ambulance Service. Martha, then, what was the impact of this problem?
Well, at around 8:30 this morning, a problem was reported with 999 calls failing to connect with the emergency services in what was being reported as a system failure. Callers were instead advised to dial 111 if it was a medical emergency and to call 101 if they required the fire brigade or police services. Now, the 999 call system is operated across the UK by BT and it handles around 35 million calls a year. That's an average of 100,000 a day. But on a hot sunny Sunday like today, the peak is often much higher than that. Well, by around 9:30 this morning, the emergency services reported that they were again receiving 999 calls, but they said there were still some residual problems. BT confirmed they had been experiencing problems and had moved 999 calls to a backup platform in what they described as a fast-moving situation, but there's still no information on what caused this morning's failure.
OK, Martha, thank you. Police in California searching for the actor Julian Sands say they have found human remains. The 65-year-old, who is best known for his role in A Room with a View, went missing more than 5 months ago after setting out on a hike. Police say the remains were found near Mount Baldy and have been transported to the coroner's office for formal identification. The Prime Minister has admitted it will take time to bring overall NHS waiting times down in England. Later this week, the government is expected to announce details of a new staffing plan that Rishi Sunak has described as the largest expansion in training and workforce in the NHS's history. Well, Lewis Warner is here with me now. Lewis, the Prime Minister then making clear there are no easy solutions.
No, not at all. And the Prime Minister, of course, made cutting NHS waiting times one of his key pledges alongside things like halving inflation. Now, this week we'll hear a lot about what they're calling the NHS long-term workforce plan. In short, it's about ensuring the health service has enough trained doctors and nurses so that it can bring down those waiting times, which are stubbornly high. The overall number of people waiting is the highest it has ever been. People missing targets for cancer treatment and other treatments too. The pandemic, of course, being blamed much for the backlog. Now, the government say we'll see the largest expansion of training and its workforce in the NHS's history. But of course, the problem with the NHS and the people who use it is immediate. It's happening right now. And by the very nature of this plan, it is, of course, long term. It takes 7 years to train a doctor, for example. So we may not see all of the benefits right away. And the Prime Minister was speaking on the BBC earlier.
What it will represent is the largest expansion in training and workforce in the NHS's history. And it will mean people can have confidence that the doctors and nurses and GPs that we all need will be there, and that we can reduce our reliance on foreign-trained healthcare professionals. I think that's something everyone wants to see. For the first time, this plan shows how we can do that.
So the details aren't absolutely clear right now, but we do know that they're going to introduce a role about apprenticeship doctors, possibly to fill some of those gaps, maybe even make it free for people to go to university and study to be a doctor, encouraging more people to do it, and of course using things like AI. But of course the NHS is also hampered by strike action at the moment, with more strike days coming next week. So the criticism will be, if you can't satisfy your current staff, how can you encourage more to join?
OK, Lewis, thank you. Cricket now, and England's women are in need of wickets on the 4th day of their Ashes Test match at Trent Bridge. Bowler Kate Cross struck early to claim England's first wicket of the morning, but with Australia just one down and with a lead of 160, England will need further breakthroughs if they're to avoid defeat. The Princess of Wales has taken a behind-the-scenes look at the work of Wimbledon's ball boys and girls. Kate, who is patron of the All England Lawn Tennis Club, joined 8-time champion Roger Federer to speak to the youngsters about the experience of going through the training programme. And that is it for now. Geraint Vincent is back with the evening news at 6:30. Bye-bye.